Welcome everybody to yet another live interview. And man, I'm excited. It was a little bit of a struggle because I made a mistake with my calendar. However, nonetheless, I am here live with Lance Salazar. We are going to talk about and focusing on relationships, miracle mornings for couples with kids, right? Everything about couples with kids. I'm excited about this. I haven't talked about that much with people about this. So um, I'm really looking forward to this, Lance. Before we dive into who are you, I'd like to start off with the first question because I checked out your website a little bit and I was pleasantly surprised and excited, even got more excited. So I'm wondering, man, let's start off with this. How does one create a legendary relationship when they have kids? Because that is a struggle. I mean, it's my struggle. I was going to say for everybody, but it's my struggle, right? So please enlighten me, enlighten everybody that's watching.
Well, that's us. Well, thank you for having me on your show, Klaas. This is really cool. Facebook Lives are, make me a little nervous, but that's all right. It's good to be uncomfortable, which is getting uncomfortable and getting to the real issues, which creates growth, is one of the big parts of creating that legendary relationship, but it's a super loaded question. But why our focus is, couples that have kids is because, my wife, Brandy, and I noticed that the wheels on the bus of our marriage really fell off when we had children. And I think, I'm sure that the cracks in the armor were already there. The relationship foundation hadn't really been strengthened or what have you. And I think what having kids, or at least me becoming a father, did initially was expose me for all of my weaknesses and all of my faults. And it additionally didn't allow me to recognize or play to my strengths. So, how does a couple create a legendary relationship when they have kids? I mean, like I said, there's a lot of things that go into that. But to that end, Brandy and I, our philosophy is built on what we call our 4 legendary relationship elements. And really what it begins with, and what we started with when our marriage was in its dark ages, when we were separated, was that we needed to get back to working on ourselves. The core belief that, your partner completes you, or your partner is supposed to make you happy, is false. You are a complete whole person by yourself. You create your own happiness. Your spouse, your partner, from an interdependent perspective, we can talk about codependence and interdependence later, the difference between those two. You can create something magical and beautiful and wonderful with them, but the idea that they complete you is one of the things that I had to get away from. I had to be my own happy, healthy, thriving, growing individual to bring that person to the relationship. And same with my wife. I mean, there can always be one person. I'm going off on a million tangents because you asked such a big question, but it's okay. I think that it's okay for one person to start to grow into that person, but the other one has to come along. I don't think that, you should be pushing or totally pulling that other person along with you. What happens is that the two of you go on your own journey and you inspire, encourage, motivate each other. And through that, you can create something beautiful. We can talk a little bit about codependency and interdependency, because because of this whole you part, the foundation of you being a happy, healthy person, a lot of it has to do with having your own journey and then coming together and creating one, as a couple. And so we talk about, codependency. Imagine these 2 fingers are people. And I use this model a lot because it makes some sense. But codependency is kind of like these 2 people leaning on each other. They kind of need each other to hold each other up. And if one falls away or moves away, then that one falls over. We believe in 2 people standing on their own 2 feet. They can come apart and have their own separateness, their own journeys, their own things they love, their own growth, their own, goals and objectives and whatever else, but then they can get as close as they possibly can and create something beautiful as well. So And that's more like interdependency versus codependency.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of our, once, you're two happy, healthy individuals growing, thriving, you don't have to be perfect. I mean, perfection is a disease really, but you need to be moving in that direction of growing. And then the other parts of our relationship elements are your partnership, your friendship, and your lovers element, partners, friends, and lovers. The partners part of the relationship has to do with sort of the business side. It's really kind of the unromantic, unsexy component of relationships. But we believe that's where a lot of couples get stuck. That's where we got stuck. It's sort of like we don't have this sort of emotional intelligence ourselves already. So we're fighting about all these things like, well, you didn't do that, and you didn't do the dishes, and you didn't take out the garbage, and the kids miss practice, or the kids are late for school, and the finances are terrible, and all of that sort of stuff. And that's where all the arguing goes on. And we call this the partnership loop. So we get stuck in just barely trying to survive, that we tend to constantly battle and fight because we haven't communicated or found our way in growing that business part of our relationship that kind of keeps the lights on, so to speak. But once that gets it gets into lockstep, or at least you have a plan, a communication, agreements in place that say, this is how we're going to grow the business of our marriage and our family, then you become friends. Like, oh man, I actually really like you. I like being around you. You're my buddy. I can share with you. We can laugh together. We can go on dates. We can have a good time because we're not worried about all this other crap, and we're not, battling with each other. I mean, challenges happen in relationships. It's how you resolve and deal with those. And then once that friendship that, you're truly feeling like you're the closest, friends you could possibly be, is when you grow into that true intimacy, that vulnerability, the intimacy, and I guess it's Facebook. We won't talk about sex too much here, but it's all of those things. I don't know. I like Facebook Lives. I don't know what they're like. You can't talk about.
And they cut me off. That's fine.
Right. So, but it's all of that. It's that passion. It's like, it's the things that only you know about the other person that they know about you. It's that masculine, feminine energy, and it's that pinnacle. And when all of those other pieces are built, and the foundation of you, and getting in the partnership and the friends, and then it's that ultimate, lovers piece. And so through all of that, ultimately what Brandy and I, our philosophy and what we try to teach and what works for us is creating direction out of your relationship. I love the line. It's from a Woody Allen movie. It says, relationships are like sharks. They're either moving forward or they're dying. And so I think a lot of couples get caught in this sort of loop of that partnership loop, or even just complacency. It's just sort of like, okay, we live in this house together and we have the kids, and, and the centerpiece becomes the kids, and, they're not really growing together. And so Brandy and I are big on creating directionality. I don't even know if that's a word, but there's this forward movement. There's this every single morning, and this is part of the book, The Miracle Morning for Couples, is every single morning we get together and we talk about what's going on in our lives. And, hey, what do we want to do? What do we want a relationship to look like? What are our desires? What do we want to build? Just like a business, right? You can't just say this business is going to thrive and you just sit there with your elbows down waiting for your customers to come to you. You have to lead generate. You have to have goals, objectives, milestones, or like losing weight, right? I want to lose 10 pounds. Well, you've got to have a plan to do that. You have to be able to exercise or create what does that look like? You can't just sit on the couch and will your way into losing 10 pounds. So I don't know if that ultimately answers your question, but it sort of builds a foundation of what Brandy and I try to teach, through Legendary Couples with Kids, and with a very detailed way of doing that in the mornings. Or actually, we'll even say in the book, it could be any time of the day, but we have chosen mornings, and it goes hand in hand with Hal Elrod's Miracle Morning Message. So, yeah.
Awesome, man. There's a couple of things that you mentioned, or that I found in there, that are so important. One is taking action. Two is being careful not to become complacent, right? Because we're so accustomed at a certain time, like, oh, my wife does this for me, my wife does this, and think that's normal, right? Think that, and even worse, think that she should or she must, right?
Right.
It's like, my wife cooks, so she must have have dinner ready, or she must have my lunch ready so I can eat. And if she doesn't, then it's like what you mentioned. Like, that's when you start fighting about what are you fighting about, dude? Just if she doesn't cook, then make an egg if you can't cook, right?
Right.
So I really appreciate that. In regards to Facebook not liking us talking about sex, then I have no problem with that. It's part of life. So anybody that can't handle that, then there's shows that doesn't talk about sex, so you can watch those.
Well, it's part of a healthy relationship, right? And we talk about it a lot, and for us, it's, we talk about it being sort of this pinnacle. I think there are couples out there, if we want to talk about this a little bit, that actually have what they say is a good sex life. Like our sex life is great. We have no problems with that, but we're constantly battling about all of these other things. And I think what happens, and it happened for us, like one of the challenges, Brandy, our relationship was not always miserable, right? There were times when it was good or okay. When I looking back, I would say it was okay, then not okay, no okay, then not okay. And when things were okay, when she was actually like acting like she liked me, I would sit there, Klaas, and I would say, when is this going to suck again? When is this not going to be good? Because I had this defeatist mentality about a relationship because I knew its cycle. I knew its cycle from bad to okay, bad to okay. And sometimes it got okay because we happened to have sex, and it happened to be okay. It happened to be good, right? And so a lot of couples are like, our relationship sucks, but we just had sex, so everything's good. Everything's okay, And then it's not. And then it's like, well, wait a second, So I get that argument a lot. Well, our sex life is okay. It's good. I'm like, yeah, okay. But you're resting the okayness of your relationship on the fact that you have sex once a week and that it's pretty decent sex. But everything else is terrible, And even the sex, do you even talk about how great it is? Are you actually meeting her needs in that? So, or vice versa. So anyhow, yeah. So I think that's the trap a lot of, couples and even us got caught in as well. So
I like what you brought it up because I spoke about this with one of my clients this morning as well, and me sharing with him what sex did to me and how important it was. And it's like you could be fighting for a week, or no, let's say it like this: you could be in a fight, right? And then the whole week you'll be thinking about, and you're thinking like, what a bad woman I have, and I don't like my wife, and why am I in there? And then you have sex together, and all of that is gone. I have the most amazing relationship. And I started pondering on that. So I'm glad you brought that up because I started pondering on that. I'm like, something is not right here. It shouldn't be about sex at all. I mean,
well, yeah. And the challenge here too is that I think a lot of men, for them, like, because they're so focused on a lot of the physical aspect of their relationship or the physical aspect of sex. And for a man, quite frankly, then this is why they're still fighting and whatever else too after that is because oftentimes men don't understand the need that women have around sex, right? There's an emotional attachment to it. They want to emotionally connect. Men just want to get off, right? I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. So when that need is met for the man, he thinks everything is okay. And the woman's like, sure, we had sex, but wasn't emotionally connected. You didn't meet my needs. And so I'm just going to go back to being pissed off at you. And so there's that going on too. And so one of the things I remember even Brandy came to me one time when our marriage was really bad, and I was really into guitars. I still love to play guitar and whatever else. But there was this period of time where I was buying and selling guitars. Like I would buy one and then sell one and buy. But anyhow, I could tell you just about any make and model of a guitar and all the parts and how big, certain parts of it. Well, I mean, I could basically tell you everything about all types of guitars. Mm-hmm. And I was like super passionate about it, super hyper focused about it. And it pissed her off because I was passionless in our relationship. And she's like, I know you have it in you. I know you have it in you. If you spend 10% understanding me the way you understand those damn guitars, our relationship would be 10 times better. And it was like, bing, it was like a big, red light or siren or whatever went off that it was like, she's right, So that's, I think, men, I tell a lot of men now too, study your partner, know about her, learn about her, understand women. People are, you can't understand women. I'm like, do you study it? Do you actually understand the basic general difference between men and women? And I mean, I'm generalizing here. I could probably get a lot of hate mail about that. However, even though my wife sat in her masculine energy in the business that she had back then and brought a lot of that home, she wanted to be more feminine. She wanted to bring more of a masculine energy, especially into the bedroom and everything. And she wanted me to create that safe environment. You know, she wanted me to be the banks of the river for her flowing femininity. That was the river, the flowing river. And so, you know, I'm going off on all sorts of tangents here, but that was what was super important, was knowing my wife, knowing her, understanding her, learning her, listening, and studying.
Love it, man. I love tantrums. I
I'll
love
just go all over the place.
That's when passion comes out, emotion comes out, the biggest golden nuggets come out. So I appreciate you. I definitely appreciate, and I keep saying that to everybody that have online, the openness and honesty of the way you share stuff is just absolutely breathtaking. I love it. It's so important. And that's where we learn the most from, because so many of us, we are so close, we're so afraid to share our biggest, not failures, but mistakes that we made, struggles that we had with others because of how people are going to judge us, right?
Yes, you're
so
absolutely right.
We're going to talk about that more, and we're going to talk about a lot of things more. But before that, man, I promise you, give me a little background story of who is Lance, and share with us, you know, because I'm always interested in that. Of course, it puts things a little bit more in perspective, how long you're married,
Yeah.
And of course, some background about your kids as well. How many kids you got, their age, et cetera, right?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I know. We never even got to that. Who am I? You know, why do you even have me on your show? Why am I even here? Yeah. So my wife and I, Brandy, I'm going to use her name a lot because really she is a big, big part of what we do. Huge. I mean, like she's like probably 90% of it. I'm like the 10%. I'm like, do you want us both on this show? Because she's the super awesome and amazing one. But anyhow, we've been married 14 years. We have two daughters, Huli, who will be 11 in July, and Natalie will be 8 in July. And we live in Northern California. So right now it's 10:21 a.m. here. I think it's nighttime where you are, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But we live in Northern California, kind of near the in between the Sacramento and Lake Tahoe area of Northern California. We live in this tiny house in Auburn, which is another whole entire story about how we even got here. But I think the important part, at least as far as relationships go, is, you know, when Brandy and I, about probably about 10 years after we were married, was when she asked me to move out. We'd had moments of talking about separation before, but it was in that moment that it was all real this time. I think this time, even though it had happened maybe 4 or 5 other times we talked about it, I really went through the motions of looking for a place to live and how are we going to tell the kids, because, you know, they were like 6 and 3 at the time, and we're seeing what was going on in the house. And I had to take a really good look at myself. I think, you know, we knew that we had marital problems, you know, 2 or 3 years even before that. And we had gone through counseling, we'd seen therapists. And, but I think what I failed to do in those other times was understand my own DNA on the situation. I think I still continued to believe that if I was going to work on this marriage, then Brandy had to as well. And I carried a lot of resentment and blame. Brandy was in the commercial development, you know, and real estate investment space, and was an entrepreneur, you know, and she was crushing it, totally crushing it. I am a pharmacist. So by trade, I'm actually a pharmacist. I was at the time working for a health plan doing contract negotiations for them. So I was actually doing a very unique pharmacist job. Wasn't a typical pharmacist. But ultimately, at the time I was depressed. I was unhappy with the direction of my career. I was unhappy with the direction of my health. I was not being a very great father as far as really truly connecting with my girls. I kind of felt in a lot of ways sometimes that because they were girls that they'd probably, you know, get more connection through their mom, you know, but not truly understanding, you know, how to be a great dad of girls. And I certainly wasn't trying to optimize my relationship with Brandy. 3 of the I know I'm going now again off another tangent of who Lance is and who we are, but one of the three, we have these three things we talk about that really kind of trash a marriage, and it was trashing ours was, lack of time, not spending time in your relationship, not having direction in your relationship, which we kind of touched on a little bit before. And the big one that I was experiencing at the time was loss of self. And we kind of talked a little bit about that with codependency and interdependency, but loss of self was something that was really big. I mean, before I got married, I really was really strong and confident in my work environment. I was strong and confident in my health. And for one reason or another, when I got married, and especially as a father, I kind of became floating along. I was kind of floating along on this sort of, a turbulent sea, and I didn't know how to swim, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't have this direction. I'm like, I'm just going to work every day, doing what I'm doing, and I'm not connecting with my family, which is ultimately what was important. So what's funny is that a lot of people will ask us, well, didn't you consider, separating or getting to or staying together for the kids? You have these kids. Didn't you decide that, even though your marriage was, not only, I mean, it was sucking or whatever else, but didn't you kind of figure you should probably kind of work on it because of the kids, stay together? And we're like, no. We kind of stepped back, and when we decided to separate, we were like, why are we really doing this? What's really important? It was that our kids weren't seeing the relationship we wanted to have for them when they were older. I think a lot of us carry in that old programming into our relationships from what we saw, right? We saw how our parents, interacted as a couple. And so I think a lot of, adults, once they're adults and decide to get into relationships, if they had a really strong and connected, father and mother, even if they come from divorced families, when they see that they truly thrive and are flourishing, that becomes the model for what they want later on. And I think if you don't come from, like I didn't come from a family that my parents fought periodically, they stayed together, but I never really saw love through them. I never really saw them truly connect very often. So my view of marriage was sort of this, like, I do what I do, you do what you do. We have dinner together, and then we sit in front of the TV at night. That was what I saw. I never really saw my parents hold hands. I never saw them kiss. I never saw them show that true connection with each other. I didn't know it was right or wrong. It's just what I saw. And so Brandy and I were like, this is not what we want for our kids. So we would be better off finding new partners, for them to view what connected relationship would look like. But we also realized that if we didn't take care of ourselves, we were going to carry the same programming into the next relationship. So, we decided, we were going to separate. And then, through whatever reason, so a few things kind of happened. Brandy sought the counsel of some close friends and even a coach that she had, where he was a business coach, but they got into the subject of relationships. And then a good friend of hers who had been divorced a couple of times, who actually regretted one of hers, kind of knocked some sense into her and said, you might be blaming Lance. You might be, looking at the way he is as a husband and as a father, but you have your own crap to deal with. And I additionally just started to kind of figure out I needed to grow and be a better person because I wasn't happy with myself. So Brandy came home one day and she said, you know what, let's not completely move apart towards this direction of divorce. Let's do what we now call it putting our marriage on the shelf, where the intimacy and closeness of our relationship was not something we were going to work on directly. We were going to give ourselves some grace and a free pass from really trying to work on our marriage, sort of taking all the intimacy pieces and setting them aside and not putting pressure on each other to try and make each other happy, which again, we know is not the right way. But let's just keep the lights on, make sure the kids are fed, make sure they get to where they need to be, make sure we pay the bills, make sure we do all of that stuff, and let's work on ourselves. So she began this journey of working on herself. I began this journey of working on mine, one of which, if you read our book, Miracle Morning for Couples, in the introduction, I talk about how the Miracle Morning and Hal Elrod's philosophy was one of the very first things I did, because I needed like stepwise things. I mean, what do I need to do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And he had this thing where I could get up in the morning and do these 6 exercises he calls the savers. And it gave me something to build on. And so from there was like, well, you need to read. So I started reading things that were good for, I started meditating, which was great for my anger that I was having, the snapping at Brandy and the snapping at the kids. And I started doing other workout things I hadn't done before. I started getting uncomfortable. I started doing things I had never done before. I started leveling up the people I was hanging out with. I realized I didn't have any good friends I could even really talk to about these things. Mm-hmm. So I found people I could talk to. And lo and behold, I didn't even notice, but I was becoming more of a person I liked. I actually started to like myself again. And Brandy took notice of that. Mm-hmm. And she started to like the person I was becoming. And so we got back together, and so instead of going back through that cycle again that I talked about of things being okay and not okay, we kind of said, time out. We're not going to go through that pattern again. We're going to do something completely and radically different. We're going to take the same principles that we've been doing to work on ourselves, the same types of principles to grow a business or to work on your health, and apply that to a marriage. We didn't really have anybody we were kind of guinea pigs in it all, but we decided we liked each other. We decided we wanted to stay together. And because of this sort of non-pressure we were putting on each other to grow the marriage, so to speak, we ended up growing the marriage. We ended up sort of saying, let's see if this works. Let's actually show gratitude for each other. Let's, hey, maybe if we talk each day and express something cool that the other did as a husband or as a parent, as a spouse or a parent, maybe we can actually show each other that we're actually doing some decent things. Why don't we also maybe, without blaming, shaming, or arguing, maybe tell each other ways we can get better? If you truly can appreciate constructive feedback without getting defensive, like, because I was a really defensive person, but I uncomfortably allowed Brandy to say, you know what, hey, and she would say it from a loving way without going, pointing at me. She would say, hey, I noticed this, maybe next time you could do this like this. And I would say, okay, let's try that, and so we suddenly started to create direction in our relationship, and we're like, oh, okay, this is working. Well, we also started realizing through things like Strengths Finder with people using business, rather than focusing on weaknesses, let's use the best of each other and combine that and create a cool, marriage and family unit that we can propel forward. So we started to look at, how do we want our relationship to be? And that's different for everybody, but we believe in designing that every couple should design and create a plan and take action on the relationship they want. And then, evaluating that either every day, once a week, every quarter, and deciding, that's not working. Maybe we just take this direction, do something different. And that's worked for us. So I'm going to take a time out because I don't know if I'm just going all over the place.
That's fine, man. I'm loving it. I'm picking up so many things that I used to do wrong as well that I need to connect. I actually wrote Hal Elrod. I haven't read his book yet. It's on the shelf. However, I did write him because I'm following him. I'm getting his emails, and he was saying that he's now also working on his evening routines. And one of the things you just mentioned, like showing gratitude, right? And sharing your appreciation for something somebody else did. So we started to introduce a gratitude circle before going to bed, before putting the kids to bed. So all 4 of us, I got 2 sons, right? So all 4 of us would sit on a pillow, each one of us. And then each person would take a turn to say of each 3 what he appreciated or what she appreciated that person did that day. And then give them a hug and a kiss, right? Even the 3-year-old was trying, but that was really cute. And that worked. That's something that you just explained. That worked miracles, man. That brought everybody so close and really appreciative. So I'm really happy that you shared that. I thought I'd share it because actually the assistant of Hal wrote back like, wow, this is something that's really cool. I'm going to share that with him. So I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, I really appreciate it, man. You said so much. I got so many other questions to go on that. One of the things was this, right? You mentioned something like the other, you blame the other one for stuff, right? I heard that coming up a lot. And I recently also started to learn really like, okay, the only one I can control is me. I cannot control what she does. I cannot even, because what you mentioned also is, yeah, she has to, or, and that's when the blaming starts, right? And you can't control that either. So I'm just wondering, man, with all that you said, what has become your philosophy in regards to control, in regards to what the other should do or shouldn't do, and how that works within a relationship?
Well, that's a great question. So one of the first principles I learned, so again, when our marriage was falling apart or when I was trying to rebuild me, I started actually studying Buddhism.
Mm.
And, there's a classic line that kind of goes in conjunction with what you were just saying, is that attachment leads to suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me in a relationship dynamic, anytime I expect Brandy to respond a certain way to any action or thing I do, either as a partner or as a dad or whatever else, if I expect her to reciprocate or react or respond in a certain way, I'm setting myself up for suffering.
Mm-hmm.
I think what happens to a lot of men and even women in relationships is they think, okay, if I do this, then maybe they will do that.
Mm-hmm.
It almost becomes a form of gaming or manipulation in the relationship, and it just doesn't work. And so what I began doing was simply just not, I don't want to say doing what I want to do, but I started to just do things that I thought were important and not worrying about it, how Brandy was going to react to that. Because no matter what in relationships, if you, especially like if you're not even communicating that with them, it's what, I think Robert Glover, I think his name, No More Mr. Guy, Nice Guy, he calls them covert contracts. It's sort of like, I did that for you and I expect you to do this for me, but I'm not going to tell you, you need to do that for me. And it's like a bunch of BS, man. It's like, and so additionally so if you attach and have that expectation, then you're leading yourself down a path of suffering. And so that was a big one for me, to not expect Brandy to act any, like you said, you can only control you. You can't control anything they do. Additionally, one of the other things, I read The Way of the Superior Man by David Deida, and it's a super polarizing book. Some people read it and they're like, oh, it's too much, or he's too egotistical or whatever. But if you strip away a lot of, the way he says things, there's a very great message in there. But one of the things I really love is he talks about 3 stages of relationships. And he has special words for them, but I can, break them down in one more simplest ways. He says, stage 1 is where you ask in the relationship, what can this relationship do for me? It's a very selfish way. It's almost like you're getting into the relationship, or you're utilizing the relationship to give you something. Like, what can I get out of this? He calls stage 2, the one we just kind of talked about, sort of like the tit for tat, the 50-50. I do this, so therefore you must do that for me. Or, it's sort of like keeping score kind of thing. Stage 3 is, and I forget this, he has a special way of what he calls it, how he labels it, but it's basically becoming a giver. It's just selflessly giving. And he's not talking about getting railroaded by being the person who's being taken advantage of because you're doing all the good things and they're doing nothing. The idea is that you're so pleased or confident in yourself that you don't need anything from your spouse. Not that you don't desire or want to have something beautiful with them, but you ultimately, at the core of your being, are so comfortable and confident with who you are that you don't actually need your partner to give you anything. And so therefore you give to them selflessly. Even Hal mentions in the book that we wrote with him that he says, I always ask myself every single day, and I love the way he puts it. He goes, to ask myself, how can I add value to my wife's life without thinking about the value she's going to bring to him? It's like, how can I do that for her? And so I think it's just a beautiful thing. And it's the 3rd stage of David Deida's book. And so that also became a centerpiece of what I was trying to accomplish, making myself a better person, but then in the end, just selflessly giving to my wife, not caring if she was going to receive it in a way that was loving or reciprocate it with kindness or acknowledgement or any of those things. And so that was also important too. And I think it's important just in all sorts of relationships as well, even with your kids and what have you. And I think, you also mentioned blaming and all that stuff and finger pointing and triggers. I think, when you mention the word control, I think a lot of our triggers and angers and lashing out come from a place of either like ego and entitlement, like you should do that for me because I deserve it, I'm entitled to it, or a perceived lack of control. I need to control this situation and I'm not getting from it, whether it's your kids back talking you or your wife snapping at you or that person cutting you off on the freeway or the long line at the grocery store, the barista at Starbucks taking too long for your coffee. You know, all of these sorts of things that we don't have ultimate control over, and we feel as though we've been slighted in some sort of way, and it triggers us, and then we snap and we get pissed off. So I had to let go of all of that too. And meditation was a big one for me with that, studying Buddhism and meditation and realizing that, you know, I can't control the things that happen to me, only how I react to those things, right? It's that old adage of, you know, life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you react to it. It's so true. So,
yeah, absolutely. Man, I'm enjoying this. Thank you so much for.
Thanks, man.
It's very, very powerful what you're sharing, and I really hope. I always keep forgetting, man, to tell people, make sure you bring a pen and piece of paper and take some notes. Most importantly, for everybody, what you hear, what Lance is sharing is so important, but it does nothing in your life if you do not take action. I mean, you mentioned it already, right? You and your wife, you try new things, you take that action, you fail fast, you decide that's not working, then you take new action, you succeed fast, you continue that, and you take action again to find something else. It's so important. So I really appreciate you as well sharing that, and I hope that really keeps getting into the brain of all my followers and listeners that are watching this or just listening to this. So I appreciate that. What I wanted to ask as well is, you are sharing so many powerful things, right? And you are at a certain spot already after being in a really dark place or like, you know, the bottom. Now you're at the top. Let's say it like that, right? What I'm getting at is this: people that are where you are at and now seeing and listening to you, what I've noticed for myself back in the day was immediately my brain goes in, I can't do that. Whatever Lance is doing, I can't do that, right? I don't know if you had that as well in the beginning. Maybe you don't, or maybe you've seen that around you. And I'm just wondering, what do you have to say about, or say for those to help them, inspire them right now that, you know, you get that in your head? I think it's normal that you get it, but what is your advice? What can people do?
Yeah, it is super normal. I mean, I don't have that feeling anymore with my marriage with Brandy. I don't. However, I still have those feelings about other things, you know, sometimes even like with what we're doing with legendary couples, right? If at the end of the day, you know, that through this project that Brandy and I are doing, that our relationship is still just constantly connecting and moving forward, and that our kids get to see it and they choose partners down the road that they can thrive and flourish with, then we've won. That's all that matters to me. But there are times, you know, because I'm a pharmacist by trade. That's all I've known. I've been in pharmacy for 30 years. All of this new stuff about trying to do this project of helping people with their relationships is new to me. Like, I know our story and I know the tools that, you know, have worked for us, but I constantly go through this thought process of like, who am I? Who am I to do this? How do I do this? I can't do this. And then I have to stop and say, you know, it's a constant for people who do this, Klaas. And if it's their relationship that's challenging, I would just challenge them to they're watching your show, right? They're not watching, you know, they're watching your show because they want to grow and become a better person themselves. So keep doing that, you know, keep growing, keep learning, try something new. And if it's not related to your marriage, just try. Like, one of the best things I did when my back was against the wall in my marriage was I started new things. Well, I don't do it anymore, but I started CrossFit. You know, I don't know if you guys have I think it's a worldwide thing, right?
Yeah.
I knew nothing about it. I was afraid of it. I walked into this CrossFit gym with these huge ripped people just doing all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, oh, what am I doing? Why am I here? You know, and I was super uncomfortable. But I kept doing it. I didn't know what I was doing at first. And each day I'd keep practicing. I'd get a little better, a little bit better. And I think that's what I had to tell myself was that it's okay. It's that I think there's a Chinese proverb that's like the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Just take the first step. Just take that first step. One little thing, one little habit. Atomic Habits is this book that came out recently. And I've heard a lot of people talk about taking tiny little things. Even if you say, I want to run 10 miles someday. Cool, great. Maybe the first step isn't even going out and running 100 yards. Maybe the first step, the first habit is for 1 week, you just put running shoes on. Do one little thing that moves you forward. And you'll find that sooner or later that all of these things, like I want my marriage to be great. You can't just go from my marriage sucks to my marriage is great, in an instant. It's tiny little habits, tiny little things that compound after a while. Like Darren Hardy talks about the compound effect of tiny little habits and things that create this ripple effect that add up, over time. And so one of the things Brandy and I committed to, was communicating and talking. It's uncomfortable. It's not uncomfortable anymore because we did it every day. The first time, even when we decided to stay together and we said, let's share this little piece of gratitude. Let's share what isn't working, a little bit, or how we could have showed up a little bit better there. Klaas, that was uncomfortable. That was hard to hear. But now she says, hey, you're doing this. She even kind of says it in a very flippant way sometimes. She's like, you could have said that better to our daughter. Oh, yeah, you're right. Totally. Whatever. I don't take offense to that anymore. I don't get defensive anymore because that takes practice. So one little step of moving forward. Even today, in our book, we talk about, because I think couples sometimes go, where do we go? How do we begin? And so we talk about a little routine we have called T.E.A.M, T-E-A-M. And I know not every couple can do all of the things right away, because the first one is called touch. And it can be done any time of day. We do it in the morning because that's our time together before the kids get up. But it can be done in the evening. In fact, when we first started doing things like this together, we would do it before bed. Whatever works, it's your relationship. You design it. But touch is the first one. And so we sit side by side or facing each other, whatever else. We might hold hands. I might put an arm around her. We might just touch knees or feet are touching. It's nothing super crazy intimate. It's just that physical connection that's really important in relationships. Even as, you read about babies, right? Those that are touched and have that connection generally thrive earlier than other kids who are not touched by their parental units or held, that don't thrive as quickly as the others. So touch, the E is education. So personal growth is a big thing for the two of us. Brandy has the books she reads. I have the books I read. She has the podcasts she listens to, or the podcasts that I listen to. So the education piece is more about me saying, hey, I read this. This is pretty cool. And so through that, she gets to learn something from me. At the same time, my teaching it to her helps me develop mastery around the subject by actually spitting it back out to somebody else so that they can make sense of it. Or we'll just sit and listen to something together. Hey, let's listen to this podcast for 10 or 15 minutes together. And then we're like, whoa, and then we'll talk about it. So we have this guy we like named Brian Johnson. He does these things called plus ones. They're like 3 minutes in the morning. It's a video of him giving some sort of piece of personal growth information. And we're like, that's cool. And then we talk about it. A is appreciation. So like your gratitude circle, that's so beautiful that you do every evening with your entire family. We just share one piece of appreciation, of gratitude with each other. Hey, and it can be simple as, hey, I like that you made me coffee this morning, or hey, I really like that you held the door open for me, something simple, or I really love the way that you helped with the kids going to bed, or anything. It'd be any little bit of appreciation we share with each other each and every day. And then M is for meeting, and meeting can be a few different things. Meeting can be, well, what's coming up today? Because we talked about that partners element where you sometimes battle it out because you don't know what's going on. It's like suddenly, oh my gosh, the kids have to be at this place at that time. And we didn't talk about it and we don't know. And oh, surprise, I've got a meeting at this time. Well, I didn't know about that meeting. So it's like, so each day we kind of go through the day's appointments, really. Hey, the kids have class. We homeschool our kids. We're like, hey, the kids have a class at 11 a.m. this morning. Cool, I'll take them. Great. Like this morning, I had to tell my wife, hey, I have an interview this morning at 10 a.m. Cool, okay, got it. I'll get the kids ready for the class. It's at 11 a.m. Awesome, okay. In fact, it was like 20 minutes till this call, and I'm like, oh man, I haven't taken a shower yet. And I know this is a live thing. So she's like, cool, I'll get your computer and take it out to the office and get it all hooked up. Awesome, thanks. So stuff like that. It's just kind of organizing the day. We've had these appointments. I know my wife reminded me my daughter has a soccer game at 5:30 tonight. Cool. Meeting can also be, though, if our calendars are already kind of synchronized or whatever else, can be, well, what's the status of our relationship right now? What could we be doing a little bit better? Are we having as many dates as we want to have? Anything like that, how are we feeling connected? Cool. What could we add, or what could we do more of or less of in our relationship to bring more fulfillment? That's the meeting component. We do this every day. Sometimes the meeting part might not happen till a little bit later. Maybe the appreciation, we don't always do it, and it'll happen later. But what happens is that habit that we have every single day, especially we like to do it in the morning, because it sets the stage for the rest of our time together. Mm-hmm. We feel connected first thing in the morning, so that the rest of the day we bicker less. Mm-hmm. Or when there are challenges, we handle them in a more healthy manner than we would have had maybe we not talked about it. If we don't have that meeting piece right, it's like suddenly, like 5 minutes before, oh, by the way, I've got a podcast interview in 5 minutes. My wife will be like, what the hell? Mm-hmm. So, and then suddenly there might be a little bit of, butting heads. So,
no, absolutely. Yeah, well, I'm glad you shared that. And I hope again, I hope everybody's listening really well. It is, for me, I don't do it every day. We start doing it once a week. But I make my own calendar, and then I wouldn't share it. And that's what happens then. It's like, why weren't you home at 7, right? Because I work from home. She works in an office. And of course, I plan that way. As you saw, now I got some room for late night interviews, but she has to be home, because if not, man, both of them would have been in here. I had one kid here screaming, the other one there. It would have been an awkward live interview. So now I start sharing that like a couple of months ago. Like every time I finish my calendar for the week, I would share it, and I'd share everything. And it freed us up so many discussions, or indeed weird moments. It's like, where are you at? So I really appreciate you sharing that. I got 2 more questions, and I hope I'm not forgetting them in all the excitement that you're sharing. I am. So one of my questions was, yes, there it is. Because you mentioned date night, and I was like, that's one of my biggest struggles, and we keep trying to implement it again. So I'm wondering, how do you organize, and what would your advice be? We got 2 young kids. We got no family or anybody close by to say, hey, can you take care of the kids, right? So it's hard for us. So how do you make sure still that there will be somewhat of a date night? Or, yeah, let's just talk about date night. Share with us your advice on that. Why is it so important, for example, right?
Yep. No, it is super important. And I've got a few things to say about it. Yeah. So we don't have any family that watches our kids either. Mm. So in the past, we would just seek out babysitters, some form of, somebody that we would pay to watch our kids, and if it was somebody new, we would actually try and find through either websites or referrals from friends, to try different people. And then, if there was one that the kids really liked, then we would just get them on a schedule, once a week, every other week, once a month, that's perfectly fine. Just try to get them locked in, so it's like, okay, and we try, like I said, we would try to find somebody that our kids would really like, so that it was exciting for them. Oh, great. So-and-so's coming. We're excited. We haven't seen her, and there was a period of time we were doing it once a week, and it was great, and sometimes we didn't even know where we were going. It was like, babysitters here, cool. We'd get in the car and we're like, where are we going? Because it didn't matter. It was important for us to have that one-on-one time. Mm. So I would say, like if it's challenging to find the babysitter, I would even encourage men to kind of help in finding that, taking some of the the heat from your partner off the plate to help them find that person, you know. But here's the other thing too that my wife and I have really learned, and I know everybody else has sort of a different opinion about, let's say, electronics or TV or whatever else. My wife and I, if we're feeling like we really just want some time together in the evening where we don't have the babysitter to leave the house, we will allow our kids to say, watch a movie together. And we've done this a few times, even when they were younger. I know yours are what, 3, and how old's your older one?
3 and 5.
3 and 5. So it might be a little more challenging, you know, but we did when our kids were like 3 and 6, or, you know, probably more like 4 and 7. We would just be in another room. They would be watching a TV show together, and we were okay with connecting that way. You know, my wife would enjoy a glass of wine. I might enjoy a nice IPA or something like that. And, you know, but it was important for us to just have that one-on-one time. And we still do that sometimes today. Our kids are much older, so it's easier for us to sort of say, okay, you guys go watch a movie for an hour and a half, and we'll go out in the backyard and we'll just enjoy the sunset together, you know. And we're like, we don't necessarily feel that a date night doesn't always have to be you leaving the house. It doesn't have to be you going to dinner together. Those are nice things too, but it doesn't have to be that. You know, our morning routine together is also kind of like a mini date. You know, we found that as long as we're spending that one-on-one, focused, intentional, present time sharing with each other, then we get just as much out of it. You know, I think a couple of nights ago, my wife and I built a little fire in our fire pit in the backyard and just sat there and talked. It was as good as any date night anywhere. So, yeah, and I know a lot of couples, they really want to get out, and that's cool. We do too. And so you just have to find that babysitter. You have to be vigilant and diligent to make sure. Well, you know, it's sort of like don't create the barriers that are stopping you from doing it. Find the way to overcome the obstacle. Well, I can't find a babysitter. Keep freaking looking, you know. I mean, keep looking until that objective is met, you know. It's sort of like, you know, you're going to continue to fail till you find the right person, until you find the babysitter, you know. I mean, that's just kind of how life works, right? We talk about successes are built on roads of failures, you know. So just like with a babysitter, I can't find a babysitter. Well, find one. Keep going. So that's what I have to say about date nights. And I would say at least, though, that one-on-one time, at least once a month, you know, if it's like getting out and about, you know, it's all what you guys design, though, but you need to find that time together.
Yeah, exactly. No, I totally agree. And it connects again with that, I can't do that, right?
Right. Yeah, you can. Keep going.
Yeah. Man, I got this. We have to make that person quiet. Who says that? So that's it, man. We're almost at the end. I just want to give you real quick the opportunity to share with us, how can fathers that are watching this follow you? Maybe they have some extra questions. Is that possible? How can they buy your book? I think that's definitely a very important question that needs to be answered. So please share that with me.
Yeah, okay. Well, our website is legendarycouples.com. Yeah, it's legendarycouples.com, no dots, underscores, anything like that. And there we actually have our free, what we call our relationship planning guide. And honestly, it's one of our favorite tools. You know, we're like our favorite tool, our favorite resource, we just give away for free. You know, I mean, we have other products we sell, but truthfully, I mean, the relationship planning guide is really an amazing, you know, first step. I mean, actually, we still go through it all the time. That's available at our website. Our book, there's a link to our book at the website. However, it's on Amazon. It's called The Miracle Morning for Couples. It is an Amazon exclusive, so it's available there on paperback, Kindle, and actually as an Audible audiobook. So it's available that way. And that's the best way to find us. You can find us on Instagram. We're definitely actually more active on Instagram, and our Instagram handle is legendary.couples. I would even invite you to follow my wife, even if you're a guy. She's Mrs. Brandy Salazar, and my wife's amazing. I'm Mr. Lance Salazar on Instagram, and I would say we're a little more active there and sharing about our relationship than we are on Facebook. And that's it. You know, that's the best place to find us. If they want to email us questions and things, I mean, there's all sorts of ways. We have a email, info@legendarycouples.com. You can message us through Facebook, Instagram, any of those places. We really believe in this project, and I'm finally really, getting out of my own way to believe, that we just want to help couples. It's passionate. As a pharmacist, I know that logically I can help people with, their health, but sometimes I don't necessarily feel into it. I feel more empathy when a man comes to me and says my relationship is falling apart, and I almost get choked up about it because I know where he's been. So, we're a very open, honest about our relationship, and we invite others to share and be open and honest about theirs, because together, all of us together are what are going to, elevate the connectedness of our relationships. We can't do it alone. I can't do it alone. So, yeah.
Absolutely true. She had that great message right before we end, so I love that. Yeah, really enjoyed this. So thank you very much for being on, Lance. I had a blast. I took tons of notes again, so I can't wait to start taking action. I gotta start doing at least that once a month of date night, man. For some reason, there's a block there, and I don't know why. So you inspired me again to set that up as soon as possible.
Awesome, man. I am really honored that you asked me to be part of your show. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Everybody else that's shared spent another hour watching this, listening to this, I appreciate you. If you have any questions still, of course, make sure you put them in either Facebook. If you're watching this later, it's going to be on YouTube, so make sure you post it there on the podcast. Both Lance and myself, we are happy to answer any other questions. So I appreciate you. Best of luck, and as you've heard throughout this whole live interview, take action. And keep taking action until you got the results, and then continue to take action. All right. Have a great day. Goodbye.
Are you still meeting up with your friends now that you're a father? Kids making you stress out. You got no time for yourself to work out, read, or relax. Can you still remember the time you were hanging out with your friends, feeling energetic, happy, and confident? Spending time together and talking about your life and your crazy dreams. You're feeling alone now, don't you? No one to share your challenges with, and you're just running around from one storm into the next. Well, it's time to change this now. Join me and the Brotherhood of Fearless Fathers to speak on a weekly basis with like-minded dads to crush your challenges, face your fears with determination, be held accountable, and regain control of your life. If you want to become the hero your family needs you to be, then go to becomeafearlessfather.com/brotherhood. I'm looking forward to seeing you on one of our next calls.